At current rates, Britain will starve before summer, and when Britain falls, Hitler owns Europe. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. German U-boats hunted in coordinated wolf packs, attacking convoys with surgical precision. They knew exactly where Allied ships would be, exactly when to strike, exactly how to vanish into the Atlantic's vastness before destroyers could respond. American merchant sailors, civilians from Baltimore, New Orleans, Boston, died by the hundreds. Ships carrying food, ammunition, aircraft and fuel oil exploded in flames or simply disappeared beneath the waves. Survival time in the North Atlantic's frigid water, 12 minutes. The strategic situation was existential. Britain's merchant fleet was hemorrhaging faster than shipyards could replace losses. Convoy system, the primary defense, was failing because U-boats seemed to read Allied minds. They positioned themselves perfectly along convoy routes, as if they possessed detailed knowledge of departure times, speeds, destinations, and defensive configurations. British intelligence had confirmed the impossible. Germany was reading Allied naval communications in near real time. The source was known, Enigma, a cipher machine the Germans believed unbreakable. They were wrong, but only partially. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park, a Victorian mansion 50 miles north of London, had achieved theoretical breakthroughs. A brilliant mathematician named Alan Turing had designed an electromagnetic machine called the bomb that could, theoretically, crack Enigma's daily settings. Theoretically. In practice, the Germans kept changing procedures, adding complexity, introducing new rotor configurations that rendered previous breakthroughs obsolete. What Bletchley Park desperately needed, what the mathematical models demanded, was access to an intact Enigma machine with current rotor settings, code books showing daily key configurations, and operational documentation explaining new procedures. Without these physical artifacts, the bomb machines were running blind, testing millions of combinations that might already be obsolete. The cost of this mathematical blindness was measured in human lives. Lieutenant Commander Joe Baker, a 29-year-old destroyer captain from Annapolis by way of Iowa, understood the stakes personally. His vessel, USS Niblack, had rescued survivors from torpedoed merchant ships 3 times in February. Each time, he'd pulled burned hypothermic men from the water, men who'd watched their shipmates die, men who'd survived 12 minutes in water cold enough to stop hearts. Men who described German U-boats surfacing to inspect wreckage before sliding back into darkness, invisible and invincible. "They're ghosts," one survivor told Baker, his voice hollow. "They know where we are before we know ourselves." Back in Washington, Navy cryptanalysts worked 20-hour shifts attempting to crack intercepted German naval communications. The Americans had access to British theoretical research. Turing had shared his mathematical models, but theory without current keys was useless. The team included mathematicians from Princeton and MIT, linguists from Yale, chess champions, crossword puzzle experts, anyone with pattern recognition capabilities. They worked in basement offices beneath the Navy Department, surrounded by transcripts of intercepted German radio traffic that might as well have been Sanskrit. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, a 26-year-old mathematics prodigy from Chicago, had spent 14 months staring at encrypted messages. She understood the theoretical framework. Enigma used rotating wheels, rotors, that scrambled each letter through multiple substitution stages. Each rotor had 26 positions. 3 rotors meant 17,576 possible starting positions. But the Germans also used plugboards that added another layer of complexity, and they changed settings every day at midnight, Berlin time. The search space was astronomical. "We need the machine itself," she told her superiors repeatedly. "We need the code books. We need intercepts with known plaintext. Without these, we're guessing in the dark while men die." The British had attempted U-boat captures before. All had failed. U-boat crews were trained to destroy cipher material before abandoning ship. Standing orders were explicit. Scuttle the vessel, destroy all cryptographic equipment, kill yourself if necessary, but never allow Enigma to fall into enemy hands. German naval intelligence considered the machine mathematically unbreakable, but they also understood that physical capture was an unacceptable risk. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, had built his tactical doctrine around Cipher security. Wolf-pack coordination required constant radio communication. U-boats transmitted position reports, target sightings, attack plans, and damage assessments multiple times daily. This radio traffic made them theoretically vulnerable to direction finding, but Dönitz accepted the risk because he believed Enigma made interception meaningless. The British could record every transmission, and they did. But without keys, the recordings were gibberish. The strategic deadlock was absolute. German U-boats were winning the Battle of the Atlantic through technological superiority and tactical brilliance. Allied countermeasures, depth charges, sonar, convoy escorts were inadequate because U-boats struck from positions of perfect knowledge while Allied forces operated blind. Britain's survival depended on breaking German naval communications. Breaking communications required physical access to current Enigma materials. Physical access required capturing a U-boat before the crew could destroy everything, and U-boat crews had proven fanatically effective at destroying everything. Into this impossible situation sailed U-110, a Type 9B U-boat under command of Captain Lieutenant Fritz Julius Lemp, a 28-year-old career officer from Munich who'd already sunk 17 Allied ships. Lemp was calculating, aggressive, and absolutely confident in his technological superiority. On May 9, 1941, his confidence would destroy Germany's greatest strategic advantage, and he'd never know it. May 9, 1941, 12:34 p.m., North Atlantic, 300 miles west of Ireland. The ocean surface rolled grey and hostile beneath overcast skies. Convoy OB-318, 39 merchant ships steaming west from Liverpool toward Halifax, moved through moderate seas at 9 knots. The convoy carried women and children being evacuated from Britain's cities, along with ballast and empty holds that would be filled in Canada with wheat, steel and ammunition for the return journey. Fritz Julius Lemp watched through U-110's periscope, calculating angles and timing. His boat had been stalking the convoy for 6 hours, patiently positioning for attack. The convoy was defended by 7 escorts, 4 corvettes, 2 destroyers, and 1 armed trawler. Standard defensive configuration. Lemp had dealt with worse. His crew of 47 men waited silently at battle stations, breathing recycled air thick with diesel fumes and human sweat. The submarine had been submerged for 9 hours. CO2 levels were climbing. Men's faces showed the greyish pallor of oxygen deprivation, but they maintained perfect discipline. "Tube 1 ready," reported the torpedo officer, a 22-year-old from Hamburg who'd sunk his first ship at age 20. "Target bearing 240, range 800 meters, speed 9 knots. Lemp made his decision. "Fire tube 1, fire tube 2. 2 G7E electric torpedoes shot forward, leaving no visible wakes. Lemp's calculations were perfect. The first torpedo struck a merchant vessel amidships, detonating in the engine room. The second hit 30 seconds later, opening the forward hold. The ship, SS Esmond, carrying evacuees and civilian refugees, began sinking immediately. Women and children screamed as lifeboats were lowered into frigid water. The convoy scattered as escorts began emergency anti-submarine procedures. This was Lemp's mistake. Standing protocol demanded fire, dive deep, run silent, escape. Instead, Lemp decided to observe results and potentially fire again. He kept U-110 at periscope depth, maintaining visual contact. This decision, maintaining position instead of diving, would cost Germany the war. HMS Bulldog, a British destroyer commanded by Commander Joe Baker, on temporary assignment from the US Navy as part of pre-war cooperation, detected U-110 on sonar at 12:38 p.m. The submarine was 400 yards distant, shallow depth, not moving. Baker had been trained at Annapolis, served on destroyers for 8 years, and participated in 5 previous anti-submarine actions. All 5 times the U-boat escaped. Not this time. "Full speed ahead," Baker ordered. "Pattern Delta. I want that bastard on the surface." Bulldog accelerated to 28 knots, closing distance rapidly. Baker's crew dropped a pattern of 10 depth charges, 300-pound cylinders of TNT set to detonate at 50 and 100 feet. The explosions created massive underwater pressure waves that crushed hull plating, shattered gauges, and threw men against bulkheads. Inside U-110, chaos erupted. Lights exploded. Electrical systems sparked and died. Seawater sprayed through cracked seams. The submarine's dive planes jammed. Trim tanks malfunctioned. The boat was dying. Lemp faced the impossible calculation: stay submerged and drown, or surface into gunfire. At 12:41 p.m., he ordered emergency surface. U-110 blew ballast tanks and rocketed toward daylight. The submarine broke surface at a 30-degree angle, water streaming off its conning tower. British lookouts spotted it immediately. "U-boat surfaced, 300 yards off port bow." Baker's response was instant. "All guns, open fire." Boarding party prepare to deploy. This next moment, this critical sequence of seconds, would determine history's direction. Standard German protocol required: destroy all Cipher materials, open seacocks, scuttle the boat, abandon ship in that precise order. Lemp began executing. He sent men to set demolition charges. He ordered Cipher materials destroyed. He prepared scuttling procedures. But Bulldog's guns were already firing. 4-inch shells exploded across U-110's hull. Machine gun fire raked the conning tower. German sailors attempting to reach demolition stations were cut down. Lemp saw men dying on his boat's deck, boys from Munich and Berlin and Hamburg, bleeding into the Atlantic's grey water. The calculation shifted: save the men or save the secrets. Lemp chose the men. At 12:43 p.m. he ordered, "Abandon ship, everyone out, now." German sailors poured from hatches, jumping into frigid water, swimming desperately away from expected explosions. Lemp intended to swim back after crew evacuation and trigger scuttling charges personally. But Bulldog's machine gunners were firing to suppress resistance, not to kill swimmers. The overwhelming firepower, the speed of the British response, created panic. German sailors swam away from U-110 as fast as hypothermia-numbed limbs could move. Lemp swam with them, intending to return. He never got the chance. Sub-Lieutenant David Balm, a 20-year-old British officer from Birmingham, led an 8-man boarding party in a small whaleboat. Balm had been trained for this exact scenario: capture before scuttle. But training and reality were different universes. He knew that U-boats carried scuttling charges. He knew hatches might be booby-trapped. He knew German sailors might be waiting below with weapons. As the whaleboat approached U-110's hull, Balm could hear water sloshing inside, suggesting the boat was flooding and might plunge at any moment. "Move fast," Balm told his men. "Grab everything. If she goes down, we go with her." They climbed aboard at 12:48 p.m. The conning tower hatch stood open, water visible below. Balm descended into darkness, expecting bullets or explosions. He found neither. He found a submarine abandoned in chaos, papers scattered, equipment smashed, water rising slowly from cracked seams. And then he saw it, bolted to a desk in the radio room, an Enigma machine. Intact, with 3 rotors still installed. Balm's hands were shaking as he unbolted the machine. His training kicked in. Don't touch the rotors. Don't change settings. Document everything. His men worked with frantic urgency, grabbing everything that looked important. Code books in waterproof bags, rotor boxes, operational manuals, message logs, navigation charts. The submarine was settling lower. Water was rising toward the radio room. They had minutes, maybe seconds. "Keep moving," Balmy shouted. "Everything goes, books, papers, equipment, everything." They formed a chain, passing materials up through the conning tower hatch to the whaleboat. Enigma machine. Current code books, showing daily settings for May and June. reserve rotors, technical manuals, radio logs with yesterday's transmissions, known plaintext that cryptanalysts could use to verify solutions. The boarding party worked for 17 minutes while U-110 groaned and settled. At 1:05 p.m., Balmy made the decision. "We've got enough. Get out before she takes us down." The boarding party evacuated with arms full of captured materials. U-110 remained afloat, kept buoyant by partially sealed compartments. Bulldog took the submarine under tow, intending to bring it to Iceland, but Atlantic weather and battle damage proved too much. On May 10th, U-110 finally flooded and sank, taking its secrets to the bottom. Except for the secrets already in British hands, Fritz Julius Lemp drowned during the evacuation. Whether he attempted to swim back to his boat and trigger scuttling charges, or whether he simply succumbed to hypothermia, remains disputed. What's certain, he died believing his crew had successfully destroyed Cipher materials according to protocol. He died confident that Enigma remained secure. He died wrong. The captured materials were transported to Bletchley Park under absolute secrecy. British intelligence issued a cover story. U-110 sank immediately. All hands lost. Nothing recovered. German naval intelligence accepted this report. They noted Lemp's death in official records, posthumously credited him with 17 ships sunk, and continued using Enigma with unchanged procedures. They never suspected. This failure of imagination, this absolute confidence in mathematical security would compound the disaster. May 13th, 1941, Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire, England. Alan Turing received the captured Enigma materials at 3 a.m. in a secure room guarded by armed soldiers. The mathematician was 28 years old, already considered brilliant by colleagues, who understood perhaps 40% of his theoretical work. Turing had spent 2 years building electromagnetic bomb machines designed to test potential Enigma settings at high speed. But the bombs required constraints, known plaintext, probable word patterns, daily key settings to narrow the astronomical search space. Without constraints, the machines were blind. The U-110 capture provided everything: current codebooks, operational manuals explaining new procedures, message logs with known plaintext, reserve rotors showing internal wiring. The impact was immediate and devastating to German security. Within 72 hours, Turing's team was reading German naval communications in near real time. By May 20th, British intelligence knew the position of every U-boat in the North Atlantic. By June, they were routing convoys around wolf packs before attacks could develop. The transformation was invisible to German eyes, and that invisibility was deliberate. British intelligence understood that if U-boat kill rates suddenly dropped to zero, German naval intelligence would suspect Cipher compromise and change systems immediately. So the British played a delicate game. Use the intelligence, but not too obviously. Let some convoys be attacked, let some ships sink. Maintain the illusion of German superiority while slowly, inexorably shifting the strategic balance. June 1941, Atlantic convoy routes. A German wolf pack of 8 U-boats positioned itself across convoy HX-133's projected route. Dönitz had coordinated the ambush perfectly through encrypted radio communications. The U-boats waited in line formation, certain their position was secret, confident the convoy would steam directly into the trap. Instead, HX-133 altered course 200 miles before reaching the kill zone. The convoy passed 90 miles south of the Wolfpack's position. Not a single U-boat made contact, not a single torpedo was fired. Korvettenkapitän Peter Kremer, commanding one of the waiting submarines, was baffled. "How?" he asked his officers. "How did they know to change course exactly when they needed to avoid us? We transmitted nothing. We maintained radio silence. They shouldn't know we exist." The German explanation: Allied aircraft, random course changes, bad intelligence on convoy routing. These explanations were plausible. They were also wrong. The truth was that British intelligence had read Donitz's positioning orders, knew exactly where the Wolfpack waited, and routed the convoy accordingly. But the British deception worked, because the course change appeared random, just one of many precautionary zigzags that convoys routinely performed. The pattern repeated through summer 1941. Wolfpacks found themselves positioned at empty ocean while convoys passed elsewhere. U-boats surfaced to attack single merchants, only to find destroyers arriving impossibly fast, as if they'd been waiting nearby. German submariners began reporting an eerie phenomenon. The British seemed to know too much. But German naval intelligence dismissed these concerns. Enigma was mathematically unbreakable. The intelligence said so. The mathematicians confirmed it. Therefore, apparent British knowledge must result from direction finding, aircraft reconnaissance, or captured prisoners revealing positions under interrogation. This failure of imagination, this inability to accept that mathematical certainty could be defeated by physical capture, was quintessentially doctrinal. The German military system valued theoretical superiority over practical adaptation. When reality contradicted theory, they adjusted reality's interpretation rather than questioning theory. American military culture, by contrast, was pragmatic. If something stops working, fix it. If the enemy adapts, adapt faster. The contrast would prove decisive. July 1941. Washington, D.C., American naval intelligence received full briefings on the U-110 capture and Enigma breakthrough. President Roosevelt understood the implications immediately. The United States wasn't yet at war. That would come in December. But American merchant ships were already transporting supplies to Britain under Lend-Lease. American destroyers were escorting convoys in Western Atlantic patrol zones. Americans were dying to U-boats. The Enigma breakthrough meant American lives could be saved. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, the Chicago mathematician who'd spent 18 months attempting to crack Enigma theoretically, was flown to Bletchley Park in August. She spent 6 weeks learning British decryption procedures, studying the captured codebooks, understanding how Turing's bombs operated. When she returned to Washington, she brought technical specifications for building American versions of the bomb machines. "We can do this," she told Navy cryptanalysis leadership. "We have the theory, we have the hardware designs, we have current keys from British decrypts. We can build machines that crack Enigma faster than the British, handle more traffic, decrypt more messages. We can turn German communications into transparent glass." The American industrial response was characteristic. Overwhelming scale applied with maximum urgency. By December 1941, Navy contracts were placing orders for 121 American-built bomb machines, 10 times Britain's production. Factories in Dayton, Ohio, tooled up to manufacture the complex electromagnetic rotors. Engineers from Bell Labs improved the design, adding features that increased processing speed by 40%. American cryptanalysts absorbed British techniques, then enhanced them with operational innovations. Parallel processing, distributed decryption, priority queuing systems. But German naval intelligence noticed nothing. U-boat sinking rates had indeed increased, from 22% in May 1941 to 31% by September. But the increase was attributed to improved Allied anti-submarine tactics, better sonar, more escort vessels, increased air cover. All these explanations were partially true. They simply missed the fundamental cause. The British were reading German mail, routing convoys around ambushes, positioning destroyers where U-boats would surface, and maintaining perfect operational security about the intelligence source. December 1941. Pearl Harbor brought America into the war officially. Simultaneously, Germany declared war on the United States, and Dönitz launched Operation Paukenschlag, drumbeat, deploying U-boats to American coastal waters. The German calculation: American defenses would be weak, shipping undefended, the eastern seaboard a target-rich environment. The calculation was initially correct. In January 1942, U-boats sank 62 ships in American waters. In February, 73 ships. Merchant vessels burned within sight of Miami, New York, Charleston, but the slaughter was temporary. American cryptanalysts, equipped with Enigma knowledge from the U-110 capture, were reading German orders to U-boats operating off the American coast. By March 1942, American anti-submarine forces knew where German submarines were refueling, which routes they patrolled when they planned to surface. The Navy organized hunter-killer groups specifically to intercept submarines at predicted positions. U-boat commanders found themselves ambushed in supposedly empty ocean. The American response combined intelligence dominance with industrial overwhelming force. If you know where the enemy is and you have unlimited resources to deploy against him, the outcome is inevitable. April 1942. Kapitänleutnant Reinhard Hardigan, one of Germany's most successful U-boat commanders, returned from patrol off the American coast with a disturbing report. 3 times, he told debriefing officers, American destroyers appeared exactly where I planned to surface, not approximately, exactly, as if they knew my patrol schedule, as if they'd read my orders. The German response: coincidence? Increased American patrol density, random bad luck. The real explanation, that Americans were reading Enigma decrypts based on materials captured from U-110 a year earlier, remained unthinkable. The machine was mathematically unbreakable. Therefore, it remained unbroken. Therefore, apparent American knowledge must have some other explanation. This circular logic, this refusal to question foundational assumptions even when operational reality contradicted them, represented Germany's strategic blindness. Meanwhile, American and British cryptanalysts were processing thousands of Enigma decrypts daily, building comprehensive understanding of U-boat operations, fleet deployments, supply schedules, minefield locations, and strategic intentions. The Battle of the Atlantic had become asymmetric warfare, where one side operated blind while the other possessed perfect vision. May 8, 1945. The North Atlantic was finally silent. After 5 years and 8 months of brutal warfare, German U-boats had surrendered. The Battle of the Atlantic, longest continuous campaign of World War II, was over. Final statistics told the story. 3,500 Allied merchant ships sunk, 783 U-boats destroyed, 36,000 merchant sailors killed, 30,000 German submariners dead. The mathematics of industrial warfare rendered inhuman suffering. But the numbers told only half the story. The other half, the secret half, involved the Enigma breakthrough that began with U-110's capture in May 1941. Historians would later calculate that breaking German naval codes shortened the Battle of the Atlantic by approximately 2 years and saved an estimated 2 million tons of Allied shipping. In human terms, tens of thousands of merchant sailors who would have died instead survived because convoys were routed around wolf packs, because destroyers arrived at predicted ambush points, because American industrial might was directed with intelligence precision against German submarines that had no idea they were operating in transparent water. The strategic impact extended far beyond submarine warfare. Enigma decrypts, codenamed ultra-intelligence, provided Allied commanders with unprecedented insight into German military operations across every theater. General Eisenhower would later state that Ultra shortened the war in Europe by at least 1 year. Churchill called the codebreakers at Bletchley Park his secret weapon and credited them with decisive contribution to victory. The atomic bomb gets remembered. The mathematicians remain obscure. Yet their contribution was arguably more strategically significant. The irony was profound. Germany lost its greatest intelligence advantage because a U-boat captain chose saving his crew over protecting Cipher materials. Fritz Julius Lemp's decision to order immediate evacuation, his choice to prioritize human lives over abstract security protocols, destroyed Germany's ability to wage effective submarine warfare. Had Lemp followed doctrine rigorously, had he remained aboard to personally destroy all Cipher materials before abandoning U-110, The war might have taken a radically different trajectory. Britain might have starved. American supply convoys might have been decimated. The industrial build-up that allowed Allied invasion of Europe might never have occurred. Lieutenant Commander Joe Baker returned to Washington in 1943, having participated in 23 anti-submarine actions and survived 2 torpedo hits on vessels under his command. He never spoke publicly about U-110's capture. The operation remained classified until 1974, but he understood what had been accomplished. "We got lucky," he told Navy debriefers in a classified report. "Lemp made a mistake. He chose his crew over his mission. I respect that choice. I'd have made the same choice. But that choice cost Germany the Atlantic." The captured Enigma machine from U-110 spent the war at Bletchley Park, where cryptanalysts used it to train new personnel and test decryption procedures. After the war, it was transferred to British intelligence archives, where it remains today, serial number M4, number 1249. Historians who've examined the artifact note that rotor positions haven't been altered since David Balme removed it from U-110's radio room. The machine still holds the settings that were active when Lemp launched his final attack. Alan Turing, the mathematician whose bomb machines turned Enigma intercepts into readable intelligence, never received public recognition during his lifetime. British security classification kept ultra-secret for 3 decades. Turing was prosecuted for homosexuality in 1952, chemically castrated, and died from cyanide poisoning in 1954 at age 41. Only after Ultra was declassified did historians understand his contribution. Today, Turing is recognized as founding figure in computer science and one of the most consequential individuals of the 20th century. The Enigma breakthrough he enabled, using materials captured from U-110, changed history's trajectory. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell returned to civilian life in 1946, having spent 4 years processing Enigma decrypts at Navy cryptanalysis facilities in Washington. She married, taught mathematics at Northwestern University, and died in 1991, having never spoken publicly about her wartime work. Her obituary mentioned service with naval intelligence during World War II, with no additional details. Only when her papers were donated to the National Archives did historians discover her role in American cryptanalysis operations. The German perspective remained blind until war's end. When Admiral Dönitz surrendered in May 1945, he still believed Enigma had remained secure throughout the conflict. He attributed U-boat losses to Allied technological superiority in radar, sonar, and anti-submarine weapons, all real factors, but secondary to the fundamental issue that Allied forces were reading German orders and positioning accordingly. When British intelligence finally revealed the ultra-secret in the 1970s, surviving German naval officers were shocked. "We never suspected," Korvettenkapitän Peter Kremer wrote in his memoirs. "We believed the machine was mathematically perfect. We couldn't imagine that mathematics could be defeated by capture." The legacy extends into modern military doctrine. American intelligence services learned foundational lessons from the Enigma experience. Physical security matters as much as cryptographic security. Operational success must be concealed to prevent counter-adaptation. Industrial scale can overcome theoretical elegance, and adversaries will persist in failed doctrines if their belief systems prevent acknowledging reality. These lessons shaped Cold War cryptographic operations, influenced modern cybersecurity practices, and remain relevant in contemporary information warfare. The U-110 capture site, approximately 300 miles west of Ireland at coordinates 60° and 32°, was surveyed by oceanographic vessels in 2006. The submarine's wreckage lies at 9,000 feet depth, scattered across a debris field consistent with gradual structural collapse. Remotely operated vehicles photographed the remains. Twisted hull plating, collapsed pressure hull, corroded machinery. Nothing remains of the Cipher materials that once doomed Germany's Atlantic campaign. Those materials were removed on May 9, 1941, by a British boarding party working against time, while their captured submarine slowly flooded beneath them. The story's final irony belongs to Fritz Julius Lemp himself. He died believing he'd failed, believing his boat was captured, his crew endangered, his mission compromised. He couldn't know that his decision to evacuate immediately, while understandable and humane, represented Germany's single most consequential strategic mistake of the entire naval war. He couldn't know that saving his crew would cost his nation the Atlantic. He couldn't know that his final moments, swimming in frigid water, watching his submarine float stubbornly when it should have sunk, were the moments when Germany's secret weapon became transparent glass in Allied hands. Today, veterans of the Battle of the Atlantic gather annually in Liverpool, where so many convoys began their perilous crossings. Fewer attend each year as age claims the generation that fought in the Atlantic's cold waters. They remember shipmates who didn't return. They remember merchant vessels exploding in flames. They remember depth charges rolling off destroyers' sterns. Most never knew about Enigma, about Ultra, about the codebreakers who worked in secret to give them fighting chance. They simply remember that somehow, around mid-1941, things started changing. U-boats that should have found convoys somehow missed. Attacks that should have succeeded somehow failed. The tide turned inexplicably until it became unstoppable. The explanation remained classified for 30 years. When truth finally emerged, the veterans understood. They'd fought blind, but they'd fought supported by invisible allies who saw clearly. Mathematicians in basement offices, engineers building electromagnetic machines, cryptanalysts processing intercepts, and one British boarding party, led by a 20-year-old officer who climbed into a flooding U-boat and grabbed everything that looked important. Those invisible allies turned the Atlantic from killing ground into highway. They turned wolf packs from predators into prey. They turned mathematical certainty into Germany's fatal vulnerability. The lesson endures. Wars are won not just with weapons, but with knowledge. Not just with courage, but with intelligence. Not just with strength, but with understanding that the enemy's greatest advantage becomes your greatest opportunity when that advantage is captured and turned against them. If this story of courage, intelligence, and the hidden turning point of World War II moved you, hit that subscribe button and join our community of history enthusiasts. Drop a comment below. What other untold stories from Dwight Hu should we explore? Which unsung heroes deserve recognition? Your engagement helps us bring more incredible true stories to light. Ring that bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the moments that changed history. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest decisions determine the fate of nations.